Okay, I want to welcome everybody to the December 5th, 2019 Historic Preservation Commission meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner Stevens?
Here.
Commissioner Scott?
Here.
Commissioner Rubis? Commissioner Hammond?
Here.
Commissioner Routon?
Here.
Commissioner Bockert?
Here.
Chair Wojciechowski?
Here.
Alternate Adams?
Here.
Commissioner Liaison Greg Nani?
Here.
Oh, I made you a Commissioner Liaison that time, sorry. Council Liaison Edens?
Here.
Council Liaison Farmer?
Yeah, had something come up with work and then children, so he said you apologize and he'll be here next time.
Thank you. Well, sorry, it looked like you had a full agenda from the looks of the minutes last time, so I'm sorry I missed that. Sorry about that. I'll try not to do that again. But I'll take a motion to approve the October 24th meeting minutes.
Can I ask for clarification on one of the minutes? And perhaps I just forgot. But on page 3, under old business A, line 2, continued discussion around the participation in the 2020 bicentennial. Did we have that discussion last meeting?
I don't think we
Don't recall having that conversation.
We didn't. It was on the agenda and we did not get the research completed.
Oh, and it even says in the notes that you didn't. No. Sorry, I read it last night and my apologies.
No, no worries. And your memory serves correctly. We did not get to it.
At least I was paying attention.
Well, only half. 'cause I-
And somebody read the minutes too.
I read the bold part apparently. I would make the motion to accept the minutes.
I
So
second.
moved by Chris. Jane seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we get some public comment from the public?
Oh,
No
they
comment.
didn't sign the card.
Okay. Well, we have a peanut gallery for our meeting, that's gonna be exciting. Hopefully we'll get that. Okay, so we got 4 items ready for action, the year in review for 2019. It was a pretty good year, made a lot of progress.
Yes, sir, I would concur. Before I begin the presentation on this particular agenda item, the department would like to first welcome Mr. Adams to the group. We appreciate your interest in wanting to serve, so thank you. If you're not here and the rest of the members aren't here, we can't do what we need to do, so very important. And also to those that showed up at 4 o'clock this afternoon to attend the demolition inspection, thank you for doing that. We try not to impose on your all's time as much as we can, or as little as we can, but sometimes it just works out that way, so thank you.
So do we want Chad to kind of introduce what his background a little bit?
That'd be great.
Don't want to put you on the spot, but we just want to know a little more.
Sure, we were chatting earlier. So, yeah, I've lived in the area now 4 years. Live over in Lafayette Trails, and got a couple kids at Babbler, and lived in Chesterfield prior to that. So, but I've been familiar with the area for considerably longer time because of that. My kids have always been in preschool over here. So, in fact, we liked it so much that's why we moved from Chesterfield over here.
We won't hold the live in Chesterfield.
Thank you. Well, I made the right decision in the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, I've been a St. Louis resident for most of my life since high school, so that's where I'm at. I'm very interested in hearing more about it.
So where'd you go to high school?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, infamous question. So I lived in North County, so I went to Hazel East.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
You're a Hazelwood graduate.
Oh, there we go.
It was just one school then.
I probably went to that in junior high, right? That was, yeah.
Both ways.
That's right. Yeah. East was pretty new when I went there, so maybe I'm a little older than I was. But then I went to Washington University, and yeah, so I've been a St. Louis resident for quite a while, and very interested to get more involved out here. Yeah.
Okay, good to have you.
Thank you. Welcome on board.
Thank
Can I
you,
add
sir.
one more thing?
Sure.
If you didn't notice as I called roll, Mr. Bockert and Mr. Routon are both now regular members. And then at Monday night city council meeting, they'll be filling the vacancy for the second alternate. Moving on up.
The guys came up to the big leagues.
Uh-huh.
You had the baseball hat on, that's what made me think.
Gentlemen, I have the bad news, though, your pay doesn't get increased.
It does, it doubles.
Yeah.
Triple.
2 0.
0.
We can triple their more positive outlook.
It's actually monopoly
These
money.
guys,
Yes.
pay double.
We can triple it even.
Sure, we're gonna triple it for you too.
I told you we were the fun girl.
I like it.
So as the chair noted when he introduced this agenda item, as part of our bylaws, we have two components. One is at the end of each calendar year, we spend a bit of time looking at the things that the commission accomplished and the things that we worked on, so to speak, not all of which have been completed. And then the second component, also on tonight's agenda, relates to the work program for the upcoming year, 2020. So what we start with is just kind of the year in review. And we do this every month. We call it our update. But for the purposes of the end of the year, it's a little different format, as you can see, in terms of the memorandum. The first thing we completed was the additional poster boards that were requested by the commission. As you know, we did 2 extra ones in 2019, as I recall. The first being the Route 66, because we had done the 11 historic communities prior to that in 2018, and I guess prior to 2019, so to speak. We did Route 66, and then from feedback we got from the 2018 Celebrate Wildwood event, we knew that a lot of people didn't know the geographic relationships between the historic communities and our current road system and things like that. So we did kind of a banner that shows the relationship. So all told, we have lucky 13 right now of the banners, I think. The 11 historic communities, Route 66, and then the guide or the location of the historic communities. So it's been a real positive aspect from that perspective. We completed the repair on the WPA wall at Old Pond School. That was something the commission was very intimately involved with during the discussion. As you know, the stones that formed the wall were splitting, breaking, and some were even popping out of the mortar. That's all been repaired. The other thing we did on the recommendation of the contractor is we did put a cap on the wall because that's where the water was infiltrating from and causing the freeze thaw that was popping the stones and causing the problems. That was a big project from the perspective of cost. We spent a little over $30,000 on that. But the wall is probably as historic in some regards as the building itself. Thereafter, we worked on our annual project, the points of interest map. Again, more so Kathy than the department. And as you know, since we started the development of the history book, we've also been adding points of interest to this map each year. And by direction from the commission, for the last couple of years, including 2019, we've been doing the scenic byways and descriptions. So the history of how the road received its name, some of the fun facts about the road, and just those things that go along with the historic communities. And it's important to note we've been doing the groupings of roads based upon the historic community and vicinity or vicinities. So it seems to be a popular map. We hand out a lot of them at our Celebrate Wildwood event. We give them out at almost all the ward meetings. We just like to circulate them as much as we can. Also, we reviewed and modified our bylaws, part of what I'm doing up here tonight. And we did complete the 4th chapter in the Wildwood History book. As commission members are aware, it's a joint project with the Wildwood Historical Society. and the city of Wildwood. And this year, this upcoming year, 2020, will be the 5th and final chapter. It'll take us from 1991 to 2020 and include the incorporation history. And then finally, on occasion, you all have a responsibility to review city projects for historical aspects. One that's been before you on multiple occasions, including 2019, was Bellevue Farms, the 100-acre tract that the city leases with St. Louis County down in the Sherman area of St. Louis County.
Sorry, I sorted them weird, obviously. Those were completed, these are underway, and we have 2 not started.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's
We
all right.
didn't communicate about the PowerPoint, sorry.
All right. So the tribute to Lisa Kelp, we had a discussion at our last meeting regarding that particular matter. The commission members requested that we come up with a policy. And the policy be based upon the relationship of the individual to the city, the Historic Preservation Commission, the Wildwood Historical Society, and then just generally their interest in history. That policy is still under formulation, Kathy and I, and so we hope to have that to you at the first meeting in 2020. As you know, we've been doing more with our Gazette website e-newsletter regarding preservation, the activities of the Historic Preservation Commission, and the things you all have done in terms of accomplishing our goals in that regard. This is ongoing. We will do this every month and every year, as long as there's a city and Historic Preservation Commission associated with it. Training, we are required under our certified local government designation with the State Historic Preservation Office that we all do some level of training. We got smart, I think, this year and decided we'll bring the training to you versus you going to the training. I think it's a better approach, and it certainly gives us more time to ask those questions and get the details that make the story even better, I think. And Kathy's arranged a couple of people that will go over here when we get to the 2020 book. The Essen Log Cabin, a major project again for all of us in 2019. This year actually saw some positive movement. You all, as commission members, endorsed the engagement of Pattern and Ives, an architectural firm that specializes in historic preservation. They came to Wildwood in the heat of August and put the cabin logs out on the upper deck of the parking garage to see what we were missing, see if we had 4 walls. It got pretty close. They are going to complete a report for us
At the end of the year.
and we should have that for you the first part of next year, so we can kind of see our next steps. January. So, also this year, and at our last meeting, we had a brief discussion about location. And as we were talking about the location of the cabin, it became clear that maybe we should talk about what we anticipate the cabin being used for. That might dictate location as well, so that's on tonight's agenda. The Route 66 promotion, the Historic Preservation Commission did endorse several work programs or items in a work program for the promotion of Route 66. One of those was involved the property that was purchased on Route 66, the city now owns. And we'll spend a lot of 2020 talking about that property, how to make it something special, and hit all the major points of Route 66 as part of its design, engineering, and construction. As with the Gazette website and newsletter, we've also expanded our social media efforts regarding preservation. Finally, there's a couple things that are on our list that we did not get to in 2019. The Orville Historic Community Marker, one of the 11 historic communities, the only one that doesn't have its marker, and that's because we're waiting on the bridge project, which will start next year. So 2020 might be our lucky year to finish that project. And then finally, And this was, I think, a very insightful decision on the part of the commission, was to create a master plan for donation acceptance. And I view that as, what will we accept, what will we not? If we accept it, how do we track it? How do we know what, where it came from, all the details? And then, more importantly, I think, if we use it in let's say a repurposing, where's it at? What's it part of? So that'll be a project I'd like to think we can complete in 2020. Because as you know, we do accept donations. Anytime we do a demolition, notwithstanding today, we usually end up with something from the property owners in terms of a donation of some type. So as the chair mentioned, we completed 6 of our 14 items. 7 are underway, and several of those, as you know, are kind of ongoing. We'll be doing those as long as we're meeting as a commission and staff. And then finally, the 2 we didn't get to, we've got a good excuse on number 3. Number 14, I think we just ran out of months. And Kathy and I are available for any questions, and we congratulate you on all you accomplished. That does not include you sitting in booths that celebrate Wildwood, the Big Chief 90th birthday celebration, hearing music that's probably too loud, things like that. So, but you all pitched in this year, and you did a great job, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I mean, that was a pretty successful year, I'd say. Other than just hitting the 2 points. But as far as the underway, you could rename that to active projects, or.
I'm proposing when you all act on the 2020 draft and I formulate it for January, the final one, I want to separate out those that are ongoing that we'll never complete. So we feel good. What we can complete, we'll have one list. Okay.
So it is better than even that shows. So.
And we couldn't accomplish what we do without
Staff.
department and staff.
Exactly.
So, see, we get a lot done here.
There you go.
So.
Hopefully, it's been enjoyable as well for all of you. Something that you look forward to, not necessarily, just feel like it's another thing on your itinerary for the day. But I think we did a great job this year. And next year, actually, I think could even be busier with the 25th anniversary and the bicentennial for the state of Missouri. And then I think we're going to be busy with the log cabin and the Route 66 park. And finishing the book. So, a lot to do next year.
There's still a lot more to do on that Route 66 promotions too.
Yeah. Yeah, and as a group, I didn't attach the memorandum that was approved by the commission, but I think there's 6 or 7 items, all of them which are pretty fun looking to do, I think. So hopefully we'll have fun accomplishing that as well.
Any other discussion of that? Thanks, everybody. So discussion of publication for the final chapter of the Wildwood Written History book, which keeps getting thicker.
Yes. So, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, members of the commission, I apologize. As you know, we've been working on the Wildwood History book for the past 4 years. I think we've made a substantial accomplishment in doing such. Much of the success of that goes to Ms. Joe Von Gruben of the Wildwood Historical Society. But without your support, meaning endorsing the engagement of a consultant at a cost to do the work for the city, we wouldn't be where we are. And then you have the role of editing, discussing what's in the chapters themselves, etc. So it really is a team project. One of the things that came out of the discussion this year was that the book has reached about 400 plus pages in its current format. And it is just spiral bound. It's a nice publication, but it certainly isn't a book publication. And so the thought was amongst the commission members, what would it cost to do a more formal like book printing for the final edition, the completed version? So Kathy contacted Reedy Press and talked with a gentleman there at length about the book. And he was provided.
Yeah, I had emailed him a link to the book.
And so when Kathy came back to me and said, I've talked with the representative from Reedy Press and here's what he said, it's like, ooh, first and foremost, the book needs to go on a diet. And, oh, that's not true.
The book and I are the same thing.
So his point was, we've got about 47,000 words.
Yep.
He's thinking we only need about 20,000 or so words. 15 to 20,000. 20,000's on the upper end, which means half of the text would be removed from the book, along with, in the publisher's opinion, many of the exhibits, photographs, etc. So it would radically change the character of the book as it's been presented up to this point. That is a pretty big issue. And that's why we're starting here. We've not talked to Ms. von Gruben, the author of at least 3 of the 4 chapters. And she may not see it as anything but a negative, which I would expect. So, we also then talked about printing. So their typical approach, that being Reedy Press, is they'll do 500 copies of the book as the first run or first publication. Those will be anywhere from about $30 to $35 per copy. And then we could sell them for $40 and make a profit. Thereafter, further publications, second, third, whatever the number might be, they drop in price then to about $20. And you could still sell it for $40. Selling the book is also different. To date, we've always made it available to anyone with interest for no charge. People have appreciated that. Obviously, we no longer have any copies. We've given them all out. And we've given a fair share to the society, which distributes it at some of their events as well. So all in all, it's been a successful publication. People like the publication. But if we want to take it to, let's say, a different level, we have to trim it down and probably charge for it.
My first take on that is find another publisher to talk to, because that is unacceptable. As far as cutting half of it out. That
You'd
just
be
seems-
cutting, if you cut it down to 15,000, you'd be cutting it down to 1/3 of what it is.
And that's what
without,
it is today.
and that's
Yeah.
without the last chapter.
Last couple of chapters, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
People are, I don't think are gonna pay $40. I just don't.
Well, they certainly wouldn't pay $40 for a book that was half that size, or a third that size.
So here's where I'm at on this. I think another press company is important to talk to. This book does need a professional editor, period. Jill was the right person for firsthand accounts, for oral history that she's collected over the years. And the input of having someone local was incredibly important. However, I did review this one time. I also reviewed it, I got through it mostly a second time. There were words that had been auto-corrected that were not the right word in the sentence. There was grammar problems, spelling problems, title problems, punctuation problems, spacing problems. The goal of the committee and the goal of Ms. von Gruben was to have this published at a level and submitted to libraries and to be taken seriously, and without better editing, it will not be. I can tell you with the cost of this, council will not go for this cost that's been estimated. It is a penny pinching year next year. And in order for me to make a really good argument for allocation, I have to know that the editing is top notch. Jill and I, in many ways, think the same way in terms of compilation, and a lot of what she did was write context. So if you'll notice, a lot of the book is U.S. history based, with also global context, and the other part is Wildwood specific. I see why she included it. I would have wanted to have done the same thing. However, from the outside looking in, she actually wrote 2 separate books. She wrote a U.S. history book and a local book. And you could, in fact, trim a lot of the U.S. book and make it a separate publication. Does that have negatives associated with it? Yes, but that would be, if something had to go, it would be that and not the local pictures in my mind. Another way, I don't know if this is possible with costs, is it possible to hire a professional editor and formatter, maybe through a university, and then just do the type of printing company that you just almost auto drop and select in, where you upload it yourself to get the cost down? But it has to have an editor, period. And the other thing is, typically in history books that are published, you footnote and you endnote. So the way the bibliography is done is an odd choice. And that's just, it's just my opinion. And again, Jill was the right person to do this, but the editing is not up to snuff. Trying to figure out how to phrase this and put this in context. I did a undergraduate thesis that I had to argue. It had to be master's quality but shorter in length, and I would have failed. Not a B, not a C, not an A, failed with where the editing is at. And I want, if we're gonna sell this, it's gotta be up to snuff. I want to be able to make a really good argument to have this published because it's important that we share our history and counsel. And so I mean this in a productive way. I hope that came across in a productive manner and not as just total criticism. But we can't have spacing problems, punctuation problems, spelling problems, and charge people $40 for a book. It just can't happen.
Is there a way that we can get creative with the state and maybe get some state money associated with the bicentennial to help us with the publication cost of this book?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know that there's, we can do more research and see if there's money specific to the bicentennial, but I have had multiple conversations with the State Historic Preservation Office on their, what they do fund in grants, and the book has never been, whether it either be the authorship and writing of the book, or the design of the book, or the printing or publication, none of that qualified.
Are there any other alternative money sources, creatively speaking?
Well, I mean, happy to do the research and see what we can find. I think that the one thing I would note is, I know it's a lot of money when we say $15,000, but if we are selling the book, we would make money on it. So while it may be an initial expenditure for the printing, if we, and I'm not saying that we need to go with Reedy Press, that's not my push, but in my conversation with them, their layout and design included an editor. If we want to take the text and cut it down to their recommendation, they have contextual editors as well, so they could work with the author to take care of all of the current issues, get the content of the book to a more, in their mind, a more publishable volume. But that also includes, the cost of that is minimal above just the cost of the book, and then we sell it and we make money, so there is no cost in printing, ultimately.
You think we'll sell 500 at $40 though?
In time, I don't
Yeah.
think they're gonna
Not-
fly off the
It's
Not
shelf
to
good.
this
celebrate
week,
Wild,
but-
not one weekend. but
Yeah.
I think-
Oh, I was just gonna say, this new guy looking at it, so I got a copy of it, came in my packet, it actually writes. And I would tend to agree, it's a good read, I mean, I was
Yeah,
fascinated
it's a
by
good
a lot
read.
of it, but there is a lot of overarching US history in there. It's not so specific to Wild, I mean, a good portion of it is extensive beyond Wildwood. Which I think is good contextually, and this is just, I don't know if anybody's thought about this, is like, what if you had more of, to make it a published, hard, something you really want to get out there, distribute libraries, et cetera, like more the abridged edition of the Wildwood history, and then an online publication of the fully available, the complete guide, I guess, kind of thing, as maybe an alternative, some middle ground.
Is this timing, is it even an option? So if Reedy thinks they need 7 months, I mean, the authoring of the final chapter has not started, is that correct?
Is it budgeted for this year?
Yes, the council has approved the contract and it is budgeted to pay for
Is
the.
Jill doing that, or is someone else doing it? I seem to recall that.
Yeah. Jill is writing the US local history, but staff is writing the incorporation.
Okay.
But to assume there's any more money next year, period, for this book is probably a stretch.
So my initial thoughts are, timing wise, if it's still got to be written and a lot of editing, and Reedy basically says you got to cut it in half, I think that throws Reedy out the window. But I would question, and I don't know that I want to suggest this, but could we complete it, spiral bind it for 2020, and look at doing something more formal as time allows and budget allows? What was the cost for the current iteration spiral bound per book? Do you know?
Let me do some math, because they wound up being about $14. We printed 500, I think we paid about $7,000. So it just depends, like this past year, it doubled in size. This last chapter was 200 pages, so that was where, so the printing cost obviously doubled. We may have 2 extra months with the date Celebrate Wildwood.
Yeah, so I noticed that in one of the, actually, the second to last paragraph on this one. So is that official that the date's moving?
Yes, sir. It's being driven primarily by budget concerns.
Okay.
We had to combine the events, the art festival and the Celebrate Wildwood event. If we have the Celebrate Wildwood event with the art festival in August, we usually don't get a very good turnout of artists. It's too hot. And they're there for multiple days. So we moved it to that second weekend in October.
How much money do we have budgeted to finish the book?
I want to say I had 18,000 in the budget.
Okay, so what if we took that 18,000 and explored other directions? Whether it's cut the book in half, whether it's edit the book, whether it's reprint the book, whether it's go hardback, whether go half a hardback. Could we better utilize that 18,000? I don't know that we can. There's some money that we could do something with.
I have spoken to another publishing company that really they would be printing the book. They wouldn't be editing and making those changes. I'm still waiting to hear back on final numbers. It's hard to get final numbers down of page count. But so we do have options as far as if we do print, and they can print it in what's called perfect bind, which is just a paperback book with the glue bound, or a hardback book. So we have options that we're trying to write.
I'm thinking that makes sense to finish it up with one more last story. And then, actually, because so many people have picked up the other book, you could hand out the last chapter and then have the other, several of the other books we've had printed. So, well, if you don't have the first part here, take this, and here's the last chapter.
But here's the question that I would have in regards to that. If you hand out the last chapter now, whether you hand it out as a totally new book with all the chapters or just the last chapter, how many people are gonna come back and buy the book once they have basically the whole thing in their hands already?
Mhm.
I think, well, that's the other thing, I think, and
If
I
it's
can see how,
Maybe it's a-
And a hardback.
Well, it's never been
Right.
professionally edited either,
It's
right?
good presentation.
If it's
well, I think Jill would agree that she has written each one of these chapters or sections sort of as a whole. And you put them all together, you got this much. And I think she would agree that, yeah, if we're gonna take all of those and make one book, it all should be edited. And I think
Oh, it had to be.
it could be, and be a lot smaller, and you look at the whole, here's all our books, let's make one nice book out of it with the nice colored cover and.
Do like Harry Potter and have like a 5-series
Yeah,
paperback.
volume.
No, I agree with that. I think though, and this is my opinion, obviously, editing it down to a third to a half of what it is now without the last chapter seems like, to me, almost like you're massacring this book. One of the things that makes it so readable is that all of that other information is in there. So, I don't know, I mean, if you could edit it down without losing that readability, because I've got that St. Louis County history book, that thing will put you to sleep in 2 paragraphs. You know, I don't know, I mean, if you could edit it down without losing that it's so easy to read and it's fun to read.
It
Yeah.
is.
Is there anyone here in favor of actually editing it down, or are we all opposed to that at this point? Because I'm opposed to it.
I would let an editor make some, here's one thing I noticed is the way it's organized, and again, I get why she did it, but there's categories of topics, and then there's also multiple timelines. So when you're doing transportation or cars, it moves ahead and forward in history, and then it'll go back to another topic and move forward and back. And there were 2 timelines. And one I thought, she left out the Korean conflict, and then 10 pages ahead, it was on that timeline. There's no reason why those can't be combined. So there are some things without losing, you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but there might be an easier way to condense it.
And that's
And
fine.
that would be,
Yeah.
that would be an example of an editor making a decision. So I would say, let's see what the editor proposes, because you might have 10 pages here and there that can be.
So what if you back up to the 40,000-foot level? What are we doing this summer? We're doing it for the people of Wildwood to understand the history. And the book we have today has been received very well. Putting it in a hardback, what's it accomplish? I mean, people come, they get our book, they take it home, it's spiral bound. Why do we do nothing but finish it and let people enjoy it the way it is? I mean, I guess my question is, what benefit do we get?
It'll survive.
Does the consumer get if it's in a hardback? It's half as thick as it used to be, or it's organized a little bit better.
Well, some people want the hardbacks, and somebody like me, I'm not gonna pay for that, I'm gonna wait for the soft bound, the paperback.
I mean,
I think-
what's the difference between this, where's the value added between a spiral book and a hardback?
I
What's-
think
where-
copies to submit to libraries, I think they would prefer.
I think
You
you
really
said
think
survivability.
somebody's gonna go into a library and pull a book on Wildwood?
Well, that would be the other thing to look at, would be, I mean, what would they publish it as a softbound book?
Reading press?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think in this in this style of book, this was his kind of recommendation, that it's a very graphic, heavy, you know, the historic photographs are all included and such, but that it would be a hardback book. But, I mean, I could ask, and like I said, the other publisher that I spoke to, they didn't discuss any cutting, and they could print either way. That's the other thing, we can always bid it both in both print formats. I think that's easy to do.
I mean, I think it would be very nice to have it not spiral bound, and I think that, in my eyes, I mean, the whole history is obviously very important, and it's good to know. But one of the things that I liked about doing it was getting to the incorporation and to have people understand how new the city is and how it got here. So that's, you know, we got, in my eyes, the most important chapter still coming, and that's the one that we really want a lot of people to see. So I think we maybe try to get one or more additional estimates on what it would cost to
Is it
To-
more than-
to do it
is
and-
more than a math problem? I mean, is it as simple as we leave it the way it is, and we charge $10 a piece for them, and we sell X, or we spend some money, and we sell it for Y, and we sell it for, and we sell Z? I mean, is it simple as a math problem? I mean, how many more are we gonna sell if we do the extra? And how much more is it gonna mean to people, and what's the value of that?
And you know, we've given it away each of these years to celebrate Wildwood. And I can see people balking at having to pay for something now.
Although
Yes,
some
it has
people are
another
amazed that they're
chapter,
giving away,
but-
though.
Yeah.
Well, I think we gave it away because we weren't gonna double dip people. We weren't gonna charge them for chapters 1 to 4 and then charge them again for chapters 1 to 5. So that was why we always,
But I don't think people necessarily look at it that way.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people who gave donations.
Well, when we had the donation jar
This year.
this last year.
They-
Well, I think if
were-
you're gonna sell it though, yeah, it's gotta be a level up from this.
Yes.
If you've been giving away this,
Right.
and you're gonna charge for this, they'll pay for it, but it has to be
Better
a whole
than-
heck of a lot better than this.
There it is. Go ahead, Dan. Oh, sorry.
How many more people, what do we think the population of Wildwood that already has a book versus how many more are gonna want a book? It's not 90%. I mean, 50% of the people that want a book's already got a book.
Yeah,
Well,
but they're missing half of it. I mean, they're missing
No, I know.
the reason.
That- that's
And, I mean, I have the copy from the year before that I have last year. So I might even have one prior to that too. Just, I mean,
and we don't even have a good fix on what percentage of the population comes to celebrate Wildwood, and that's the main place where they get it. And it's probably, I mean, I don't know. I have no concept.
All I know is what we print has been distributed.
And how many have we printed?
we did 500, maybe 600. I think we did 500 this, no, we did, yes, 500. And we gave 300 away at Celebrate Wildwood.
We had
So-
some back.
Right,
Because
so-
we wanted to have them available for after. the
Right. So 300 copies out of what? How many households?
13,000.
Yeah. That's a very small percentage of the population.
And I think there's marketing and other promotional things that we've done at a minimal level, that if we had a final finished product that we were selling, we would do at a different level,
Mhm.
you know, promotion, so.
we can do a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
If,
Well, I could see if
Hold
you,
on, hold on, let Lauren talk.
Yeah, it's okay.
Then-
It's
then
okay.
you. She's been trying.
Yeah, two things. One, can someone give me a little bit of the background on how we got to this? What was the logic, 4 or 5 years ago about giving it out one chapter at a time and not just waiting for the final publication? How did we end up?
Well, that was something the department suggested.
Okay.
And the thought is that as part of the celebration, we could have something that would kind of link the present, which is, 5 years ago, we were only 20 years
1
old,
year.
to the past, and try to draw some relationship between the two now. And as each chapter was completed, it just felt like, given staffing, given funds, we couldn't do more of that. And it just, I guess there was a fear on the part of myself, I couldn't say the department or anyone else in the department, that if we waited, it may not get done.
It may not get done. Okay, so it helps with the committal process.
Yep.
Got it.
Each year, we knew we had an assignment, each year we completed the assignment.
Okay.
And now we're almost done.
Okay, so if this, it does need a little trimming, but obviously I don't want to get rid of all of it, and I'm very passionate about history. But let's say it was formally edited, trimmed a little bit, and bound, whether that be hardback or paperback. You know, there are places that maybe would help sell it too. You know, I know exactly what book you're talking about with the county history. There are other smaller abridged histories that even the Missouri History Museum sells in their gift shops. There are other local businesses that may have it. There's, you know, smaller owned bookshops, even if it's something like half-price books that we could sell potentially bulk to. And if we need this to help pay for itself, so that would be the way to do it. But I don't think that's going to sell spiral bound at some of these locations.
So what's the goal? What's, if you put it in a box, what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve?
Well, I think collectively what I've heard is it needs editing first and foremost.
I mean, if we make it perfect, what's the goal? Is it to go into libraries? Is it get on the 500 bestseller list? Is it to give away 500 copies? What's the goal?
Well, assuming that the commission would agree to engage an editor to assist Ms. Von Gruben, the commission, in correcting all of the punctuation, spacing, etc. Then
And
the
maybe
question-
some other tweaks here or there.
Yeah, but then the question comes back to you all. Do you like the format as it is? And if you do, then why change it? If you want it to be something that's survivable and something that maybe, 10 years from now, we all look back and think, wow, that really turned out nice, because it's in a hardbound book edition, then I think that's what we should strive for. It's really your call. If you like the format now, if we edit it, get it correct, the bibliography, endnotes, the footnotes, whatever it may be, and you like what we've done, you can do it again.
Where did you come up with Reedy Press?
I have familiarity with them, and so I just called them. They actually published a book that my father wrote.
Okay.
And so I just knew that company. I don't know many other publishers in town, so, but what the bonus of going with a company like that, I mean, that's obviously that's their field, that's their wheelhouse. I feel like it's definitely not mine. And so that's why I wanted to seek out some expert advice. And I was shocked when they said the word count. But we've been doing this project over the years without being able to see the whole thing, and that's been difficult, I think. And so, we've started with this smaller format, and then, which was okay when it was a 200-page book, and in 1 year it went to a 400-page book, and it's like, well, maybe we probably should have gone with a larger size, because then we wouldn't be at 400 pages and
Right.
adding 2 more sections to it.
Right.
But the publishing company, like Reedy Press, they'll sell the book for us. They set the price. They know what people will pay. We did talk about it. It's a little bit limited. It's not a regional attraction, but they will. They have sources and outlets and places to sell and assist us with all of that. So I think that I'm sure there are other games in town, and I'm happy to do the research and call. That was just the one I just knew about them.
Well, I'm
and
just curious.
called, but
So I wonder, I mean, like, there, I don't know if university press is something that all universities use, or whether, because I know Mizzou uses them for a lot of publications and stuff, whether they would.
Or more of a historic publications.
We could certainly call down to the Missouri Historical Society and ask them if they have.
Or somebody at WashU may have some ideas as far as, I know I was using that guy for historic preservationist there. He's been published a few times. So as far as the task at hand, right? So we got the new chapter that we're going to do, right? It should be edited right now.
Yes.
But
It's got to be written first.
Let's get this chapter right at least. And then, and so that's the step that we have to get accomplished, right? And we have to look back at what we got so far and edit that. I just want to get this, I'm thinking in process, I want to know what steps we have to take to achieve the ultimate goal. And what that goal is, I think we still have to think about that and decide what do we want out of this, the overall.
Exactly.
What end
What are
product
we
do we
trying
want?
to accomplish?
And if somebody wants to take it beyond that, it's their prerogative. But, you know, I mean, is this a this year project, or can that the ultimate publication carry over as a next year project to finish the whole thing up?
That's a point too. We could do what we've done in the past, and then in 2021 and beyond, we'll actually look at doing the hard editing, the reduction in size, and then the publication component. That's another option that's out there.
Well, you know, this last chapter, a lot of people are going to be more present, so it's going to be, you know, that could be a standalone, that we don't have to, you know, print the rest of the thing. Let's just print that, and that's going to be enough for a lot of people.
I think so.
And then we figure out how to put it all together in that mechanism.
We could have a couple copies of the whole old book if they didn't get that part last
But
time.
it
We
could
could give
also-
that to them.
But it could also be a selling point if we just give them this last chapter, and we do get that whole publication together. That's the carrot. The carrot, if you want
Yeah.
the whole package, yeah, it's gonna cost this much, but it's gonna be, we're gonna take our time and we're gonna do it right, and we're gonna do it professionally, and it's gonna be something that you're gonna want, you're gonna want to spend that kind of money on.
I'm not saying it's right, but what if I'm just brainstorming, what if we put it online in a donation box? And that's it. I mean, it's online with a donation box. And whoever wants to see it can go see it, and anybody wants to contribute. It's all the way on the other end.
Well, I would think you could, on the newsletter, say you would, each newsletter you'd print an excerpt from it. The people read that and say, well, you can buy the book at, you know, at this address, and send us the money and we'll send you the whole book. And you tease them with individual sections and chapters in each newsletter and let them read it and look at it. I think they'd pay attention. Oh, I'd like to have that book. And seeing the money that people donated, I think.
It was astounding.
These people
How
out
much do
here,
we get?
they're not my family, but they've got money.
$1,000, more than $1,000, all right after.
Maybe they've got it because they're tight with it, but I don't know.
So to keep this moving, I don't think we're gonna solve this
With your all-
challenge tonight.
With your all's permission, we'll look at contacting some additional publishers. And we'll also try to figure out if there's just editors we can go with. If we wanted to stay with more of the current format, but edited so that all of those items that have been identified are addressed. So we'll come back on January with a little bit more, a few more options for you to consider. But I think over the course of the time between now and January, I think we all need to answer that question. Do you want it to look like it is, or do you want to take it to that next level like we've talked about?
Well, we don't know, to your point, you're saying that let's make sure we get the last chapter right, but that involves decisions on what context the book, or the rest of the book's gonna be in, which we don't even know yet. So really what we're saying is finish the book. Finish the book the way we've done the book. And then if.
Except maybe with some editing.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, that's a good, let's just get that right this time,
Yeah.
on this
yeah,
chapter.
very fun.
And it's still gonna have the style, the writing style, plus the staff's writing style, but it's gonna have the same kind of feel to it. It'll just be a little more.
Lauren, is there any schools that
Polished.
would take this on as a project? In other words, somebody would make it part of their thesis or whatever for their master's to clean it up.
No, and not unless there's something in the J school, but I don't think the history department would do that. Not, no. I don't, I'm not at Mizzou, but that doesn't mean,
Do we have a timeline for what we're expecting first draft from Jill and from the staff on this next chapter?
Not had any conversations of late with Ms. Von Gruen, but I think last year, it was early spring, we got the draft. And we cycled it through the commission on at least a couple of meetings, and she attended, I think,
Yeah.
both of those. But for past publication purposes, we had to have it by the beginning of July, I think it was.
At least because of the
So we're gonna be
design.
way into next year, 6 months into next year.
So we have an extra couple of months, but I would still try to stay within the same time frame, if not earlier. So we'll get you a few more options to consider. I guess a question goes back to the core of why we're doing this.
Yeah, what are we trying to accomplish? Do we want every library to have one, and, or do we want all of our constituents to be informed?
Well, that could be, that's homework for next time. We'll have to provide a no more than 20-word statement of what this means to you, what you expect out of it. We'll see if it all jives.
Good conversation, thank you for your input. It's a tough issue.
And enlightening issues. So, I mean, it read fine to me, but
Well, I know there've been.
my grammar's not very good anyway, so
There
looked
have
great to
been-
me.
There have been people who, out in the community, who have read it and have made comments on all the errors that are in it.
Yeah.
Punctuation-wise and grammatically and whatever.
As long as it's not historical errors.
Well, but, yeah, an editor's job, it's not whether you like to read or not. It's a definite skill and a profession. But somebody's an editor, they're an editor. You just don't decide, oh, I'm gonna edit this book.
Yeah, and that's not something that's been on our radar screen.
No.
You know, we were trying to get the history right, I think. That was more of our focus, as opposed to editing of the thing. So it was all in focus. We were focused on the history and not the
Good
polishing
news
of
is
it.
you can edit it done.
Well, I think, personally, I think it makes a little sense to edit it at the conclusion of the writing of the last chapter, because it does have multiple authors. And I don't see a purpose in editing 4 chapters and going back and editing a 5th. It would make more sense, I think, from the editor to do it all at once.
To make it all
To
more
make it flow.
consistent,
Make it
yes.
flow.
Yeah.
So leave this last one go, edit the whole thing.
I think get it written and then bring the editor on board
Okay.
before we print. That's the spiral.
There was discussion with the State Historical Society about us supporting them and working with them. Now, is this something that after this chapter goes in, we give them the book to go into their library, or would we not want to release it for that? Or I think it'd be nice to be able to give them something for their 200th anniversary to put in there with their name on it.
And I think this is also when we have talked about being part of the bicentennial situation, that there are multiple categories from what I've been told recently. And one of them is that you have created something, whether it be a new park, a book, you know, there has to be something. So this book and our Route 66 Park underway could be things that go into that.
Yeah.
Got it. We have direction. We'll get you one.
So, Joe had to step out, so.
Joe has to go to the Board of Public Safety meeting, he'll be back. But the next one I wrote the memo on anyway, so he was gonna.
Potential training sessions for 2020. Thanks for that lively discussion. The next chapter, no pun intended, we'll talk about next month.
It's decided to not advance. Trust me, there's a great slide on the training sessions. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, we, as Joe mentioned earlier, we started this in 2019, kind of bringing the trainings to you all for our CLG requirement. It has seemed as the years progressed, they kept moving trainings further and further away from Wildwood within the state. And when we went, they weren't always really applicable. There was a lot of small town economic development, rebirth of Main Street, things that we don't really deal with here. So we thought it would be beneficial to have them more targeted to specific issues that we're dealing with here in Wildwood. So as you'll recall, this year we had the gentleman from Rockwood Reservation explain about their historic forests, and we had somebody who escapes my brain right now. We had another training in 2019.
The bylaws.
Thank you. We had ethics training. Thank you. So in 2020, we wanted to provide you a little bit more training, and so we brainstormed 6 different speakers. Wanted your feedback on those speakers, if you supported those and thought those would be positive for your ongoing continuing education. And then if there's any others that you all would like to suggest, we're all ears and would be happy to get them booked. I did check with the State Historic Preservation Office, and all 6 that we've proposed so far do count. They would all be acceptable in our certified local government requirements. So those 6 that we've discussed were the president or the director of the Route 66 Association, Karen Fox, who is with the Wildwood Historical Society and wrote a book on one-room schoolhouses. Michael Allen from the Preservation Research Office. He is a local historian who did the first historic inventory. And then Lynn Jossie was also from that office and did the second round. Joe Harrell from Archaeological Research Center, who has done a lot of studying of the prehistory of Wildwood. We have contracted with him on numerous occasions. In fact, just this year we had him do an assessment over in Community Park that we talked about, where we found some artifacts there. We'd look at maybe a speaker on historical cemeteries and someone from Missouri Historical Society. So on those 6, I took the liberty to book 3 of them. So if you really hate 2, 3, or 4, let me know now, because I have those set up for 2020. And I've started making work at Missouri Historical Society. It's a little bit different. They don't generally come somewhere and do a presentation. They do events and things at the museum and kind of want you there. So I'm trying to get to the right people to.
You just had someone from the Missouri Historical Society speak at the Wildwood Historic.
Yeah, on a specific
subject.
book that he wrote.
Right.
So
right.
that they do.
Okay.
But I was trying to find topics that were
generalized,
something Wildwood specific. And that was a little,
Okay.
It was a little random. So we're getting closer.
Would someone from the state?
From the SHPO office?
Yeah, would someone from there come?
I worked it out.
And what's our requirement in terms of number of hours or?
It's not that specific.
Show that we're doing it, right?
Yeah, it's not that specific.
So if we
It's
did, I
just-
mean, if we did 3 or 4 next year, and we did 2 this year, so.
Right.
We'd be fine, we're not
Right.
committed, we don't need to do 6.
We don't need to do 6 or 12 or
What
anything.
was the one, Dan, that you were?
Oh,
Recommend- or we brought
we
up
talked
earlier.
about maybe doing a visit or having the people come out and talk to us, the company that's gonna do that.
That's right.
Reclamation.
The refurbishment. Yeah, we're.
Yeah, topic maybe for the future, I don't know if it's already been done, but on archiving, because I know you were talking about, you know, all the files in the basement, and I would be interested, I've been told a mix of things, you know, one from the State Historical Society, 2 from research in the archives at Mizzou, but, you know, the really fragile old documents, I was told by Mizzou that, you know, you wash your hands, but you don't wear gloves because you're more likely to tear, and then there are other museums and other archivists that only wear gloves. And so there's just things like that that are interesting, or what are the best formats for us to preserve our documents, and organizational techniques, and it'll be interesting.
So the Route 66 guy, as long as he doesn't just stand up and talk about membership the whole time, it'll be good.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be kind of worthless.
But
You know,
Fran,
if we got some history and what, even if somebody talks about, you know, what's Joplin, you know, how are they approaching their efforts? How did Springfield, how did they approach their efforts? If he's got all that, and we can talk to that, that'd be great. But, you know, I just want the membership drive.
Not looking for a six.
but Fran, you mentioned what Moshipo, that, yeah, I think that if they could talk to us about, that's mostly about how to maintain historic buildings, that would be nice to hear.
I mean,
I think it'd be good if this could be published more, and not just for us, but we could try to get more people, the public, in to hear somebody talk about Route 66 or about.
So we're gonna have a public comment part? Actually have public, the one.
Well, no, I mean, but just
Yeah.
a presentation.
Yeah.
But if I think it was, you know, promoted on the website or in the newsletter that so-and-so will be here, I mean, we're not gonna get 50 people, but we might get
Sure.
10.
We also thought, in February is when I have Karen Fox, who wrote the book on one-room schoolhouses in the area. And Joe and I had mentioned, and then Karen mentioned as well, that we're gonna hold that meeting at Old Town School. We all have been wanting to kind of see that building anyway, we
Okay.
thought that was a good fit, so we'll meet there in February.
Her new book on the roads is very good too. Finally got through the whole thing.
She's not gonna, you know, remember, we didn't take any action on that other schoolhouse out of,
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully you're gonna yell at us over that one. Big fan.
Okay, well, I will add these to the list, and we'll just try and get them scheduled. I think also with our ambitious work program, which we're gonna get into next, we probably don't want to meet or have trainings 11 times, because they will work, they'll be part of the regular agenda, so that'll eat into a little bit of our time.
I
so.
would think 3 or 4 a year ought to be, you know, if we're all here for 3 or 4, you know, 3 or 4, that's much more than we've ever
Once a
done
quarter.
before.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, they're not gonna break out quarterly just because I worked
No.
around their schedules.
Sure. No,
But,
that's fine.
But yeah, I think 4, it's everyone, what's the consensus on
Yeah.
a number that you want
Sounds good.
for?
Because essentially, there's 2 months out of the year that we don't meet. We don't meet when they celebrate Wildwood, and we don't meet.
Well, Celebrate Wildwood being.
It's going to be in October.
Yeah.
And it's earlier, so it, you know, our meeting always fell.
Right
to-
about the same time.
Yeah,
2 days before.
36 hours before October
Yeah.
time. So we may be able to hold the October meeting.
It would be the September meeting, that might be the final.
Yeah, but it's at least not the day
That-
before.
Right.
Yeah, or that week.
The night
yeah.
before, yes.
So, yeah, we'll have to play it by ear. But in fact, I intentionally avoided kind of that time frame on the talks, because I was afraid we might need to shuffle some things, so. Yeah, all good points. Okay, so we'll shoot for 4 for 2020. Okay, great, thank you.
Work program.
Work program, I really want my PowerPoint to work, and I'm probably gonna fiddle with that for just a second. You can follow along here as well and then on the handout, but, so we did carry over the 2 items from the 2019 work program that we did not quite complete. Let's see if we can try again here. Okay. So, and based on our discussion of the 2019 year in review, you can kind of see I broke down, there would be 5 items that would be ongoing. Those are all actually carryovers that we were doing in 2019 as well. So public relations efforts on the Gazette, the web, and e-newsletter, trainings, which we just discussed, city projects, social media, other duties as assigned. That always fun job type, part of everyone's job title. And then, so we have 14 items that are potentially start and finished. It's an ambitious work program. And so we'd like your feedback on if this is acceptable. Do you want to remove anything? Do you want to add anything? Do you want to, make any changes to what we have? I'll run through them real quick just so you have a little bit more background. The first on the minor repairs at Old Pond School. We finished the restoration of Old Pond School in 2001, so it's been 18 years. And it is starting to have some wear and tear on fascia boards and trim. So it needs some paint. We need to do some other minor upkeep. There's nothing major that needs to happen, but that's one that we'd like to see happen in 2020. We'd like to update the historic inventory. We didn't do that in 2019. We did in 2018, and we covered 2 years. So the goal would be in 2020 that by the time we kind of got through it, maybe by the end of the year, it would catch us up and maybe even put us through to 2021. So that we would basically do the inventory every other year and kind of get all caught up on our structures that are over 75 years of age. As Joe mentioned, and that's a carryover, the Orville Community Marker. Hopefully that will complete that program.
Well, will we be able to install that? Will the bridge be
Yes.
done by the end of the year?
That's the goal. It's on budget. The budget is for construction completion in 2020.
Okay.
It's still a goal.
Okay.
That's yeah. Here's the hook.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So then we have the chapter which we just discussed, which may have some fluctuation, and we may modify that one a little bit. The 2020 points of interest map, we have one more set of historic byways to address on this points of interest map. And that'll be something else that we'll want to discuss. The points of interest map has been a cumulative effort that has built since 2015. I think was the first year we did it. Getting pretty full, and so we need to make a decision in 2020 be the end of it, or are there other areas that we will want to add? So we're going to look at the points of interest map, not only in adding this year's byways, but also where it goes from here. Is there another project we want to take on in 2021, or continue that? So we talked again about the Route 66 promotion plan. We're ready to get going on planning and design for the pocket park that we acquired earlier this year. The oversight of the preservation of Bellevue Farms, that project is slowing down significantly as we've discussed. So I'm not sure the level of involvement that will take and how much work that will be this year, but it is something that we still, as long as the city has an interest in it, we still want to keep it on your all's radar screen and keep you up to date on it. The memorial policy for recognition of our kind of local historic champions that we discussed at the last meeting, and we'll start planning and drafting in 2020. The tribute to Lisa Kelp, that was something that was on the 2019 one. We discussed it at the last meeting. It could be rolled into the memorial policy if we want to not have something specific. We can break that one down.
I think that would be good to combine those.
Combine them? Yeah.
Since that was
Anybody opposed to combining 9 and 10?
Makes sense.
Okay. And then we'll hopefully get the bid documents complete for the Essen Log Cabin, so that'll be our phase 2 work. Once we've kind of picked the location, and the bid documents couldn't be drafted until we've made a number of decisions. Then we'll make some more progress and participate in the bicentennial celebration. Number 13 is new, but it's something that we've discussed for a number of times over the years. As we've accepted donations and then have used them in our parks. So if you're down in the Glencoe area and you see the stone pillars on the fencing, that's stone that we've gotten from historic demolitions. And then the roofs on the pavilions in Al Foster and a number of other locations. So those, we want to identify those. People see them, they have no idea what they are, where they came from. So the hope would be we could come up with a design package that would be indicative of the locations they're being placed in, but also honor the history of the donations. So we would work through that, and then we can draft the language for the individual signs as well. And then number 14, which kind of also ties into that, but again, the master plan that was on our 2019 work program.
Can those be rolled together as well?
Yep, and we can make the signage a component of the master plan if that's something you all want. So I'm going to sit down so I can type, but if we want to, any other changes besides combining 9 and 10 and potentially 13 and 14?
I think that's combining and condensing that I think that's about it.
Should we review these, if it's truly the work plan, should we review these again after we have a budget? And anything we don't have a budget for 2020, we don't work on?
Yes, except we took that into account when we drafted the work plan.
Okay, so there's a good chance that most of these are funded?
These are achievable, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah.
I think it's more driven by time than.
Yeah, that was what I started with. This is an ambitious work program. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions,
Do you need any
suggestions?
motion on this, or?
I'd love a motion, so or I can make the modifications. I'll bring a little more formalized version in January, and we can.
We're not formal, are we?
Or you can make the motion now with the 2 modifications.
I'll take a
I
motion.
make a motion.
Okay.
I'll take a motion.
I'll second it.
Well, I'm not making it.
Okay,
Who wants to make a motion?
Dan said yes.
I make a
Dan,
motion, we
okay.
make those changes, and we make it effective.
Steve seconded
I
it.
second it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Work program.
Sounds good, thank you.
Yeah, no, I think that the signage on it, because I've come up to those, it would be interesting to look at this building and just to know that, hey, the roof came from such and such, and, this, stone came from someplace else. I think it would be interesting. I'd like to know
And
that
it
kind of
keeps
stuff.
the history of what has been disposed of still with us.
Yeah.
You know what we could do, once we get all these markers in place? The snowman search, people love it, the businesses love it, we have heard so much good stuff in economic development, the passport program. I mean, it would be really nice to create a mini program just to visit all of these markers. And then you could do a social media presence, to take a picture with the marker and post it and try to, but make it its own program. Just,
Well, I think our chair is trying to do some kind of bike route of the.
yeah,
island.
same thing.
Hey, that's a good rhyme, let me tell you.
How many miles did you say it?
I noticed
It's
there
like
was a big
32
crowd at the
miles.
Kelpie marker when I went by tonight.
I was surprised too.
That's a dangerous one.
Yeah, it is. We'll figure out something eventually.
Yeah.
Well, didn't you say that the bridge up there at the intersection is to be
Eventually.
redone? But that's down the road in a few years.
Yeah. And I guess the feeling was, let's get the marker out, at least temporarily. It's a temporary location. I think we all realized that when we were out there that day dodging traffic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that we can make it, I mean, fun ways that we give awareness to this stuff. So, and then we can get social media in there and stuff like that. I know bicyclists love Strava. That's what I did. Posted my pictures next to the signs, hold the bike up, you know, it's kind of fun.
Thank you.
So the next ready for action is the discussion regarding the future location for the Essen Log Cabin. Sorry I missed this last. Sound like it was lively.
It was a very good discussion, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Out of last month's discussion, it became apparent that maybe we had the tail wagging the dog, meaning that we were talking about location without really understanding how the cabin might be used. And the use of the cabin may dictate more so than not a preferred location or preferred locations. And so we started, for the most part, with several locations. And as part of an addendum, so to speak, I provided the chart that we used at the November meeting. I did add the village green to the chart, but did not provide any numerical ratings associated with the different characteristics. But we started with Community Park, Glencoe City Park, and the City Hall site. All of those had been discussed at one point or another over the course of the last year or so. And then again at the November meeting, this past November meeting, we meaning the commission, recommended that the village green be added as a potential location as well. As we talked more, it became apparent that we weren't quite sure about some of the characteristics, so to speak, like, well, if it's going to retain just its rustic kind of when it was built, it won't need any utilities. So why are we worried about, why are we ranking utilities as a component of the site selection criteria? And so the thought was maybe we should step back and just talk briefly tonight about what do we want the cabin to do when it grows up, so to speak. And Kathy and I provided a table that it could just be more of a museum setting where people would make an appointment, come by with maybe a Girl Scout troop, a Boy Scout troop, class from the local school, and maybe just take a tour of it and then be done. And those would probably occur during the day. So from that perspective, maybe we don't need all of these utilities, including electric. It could be just a meeting area, much like Old Pond School, where we have furniture inside with minimal utilities that people could hold a meeting there if they chose. It could be the Wildwood Historical Society, one of their subcommittees, it could be us, it could be anything like that. An event space. Obviously, people like to get married or have reunions or do other things in some different places these days. It's not all the time places of worship or reception halls owned by unions and things like that. And so it could be a wedding venue, it could be something akin to that. And obviously, as we go down the list, the need for greater services, utilities exist. And then the collective, what's your all's idea? I call it other activities, but there's probably more than just what I've described and what Kathy and I prepared for the memo. So the thought is, the less use the building has, probably the less we need to invest in providing services and utilities to it. The greater the use, the more expectation we'd like to have in terms of people using it, we probably need to make it a little bit more accommodating. And so that's the perspective that we're trying to understand, Kathy and I, tonight. do you have when you think of Essen Log Cabin, do you have what's it gonna be?
Do we have budgetary constraints?
We do in 2020, as Mr. Evans mentioned, it is kind of a year where we're kind of stepping back and refilling the gas tank, so to speak. But this is a project that's been identified to the
I
city
mean,
council.
we'll build a cabin, but it could be just the cost to rebuild the cabin, or it can be the cost to put electric in it, or it could be cost plus sewer plus accessibility. I mean, do we have a cap? Do we need a stand?
We don't, because we don't even know what the cost is to begin. So that's part of what Pattern and Ives is doing, is getting those plans and bid specifications so we can go back out and just understand what the reconstruction, and then add in whatever else we want. I think it's key to note that, like, if it is more of an active facility, it's easier to place it somewhere where we have some of the services, like City Hall or the Village Green. If people need a restroom, they can come over, or things like that, or parking. We already have parking that's available. So it's really what I think Kathy and I are asking you to consider is, what would you like it to be?
Do we know what kind of traffic the Old Pond School gets? a
Yeah,
year?
utilization of
Yeah.
that facility is,
In terms of meeting space.
The pavilion during the spring and summer and early fall months gets rented quite a bit. It's a nice pavilion. There's limited parking. There's only 13 spaces on site. There are several groups that use the Old Pond School for subdivision meetings, the Pond Athletic Association. They have monthly meetings there. They're generally smaller groups again, too.
Church used it every week for months.
What's the square footage of Old Pond School?
I want to say about 900 square feet.
And then what do we believe the Essen Log Cabin is?
We were thinking about half,
Half of that.
or less than half of that size.
I personally don't see it being high utilization for a meeting space. A museum, a tour, here's how they used to live, a reenactment type of space in Village Green, I think is very appealing. But even in that, Glencoe Park, the city park could fit that need, personally.
No, I mean, I think, well, Pond School was an assembly place, so I think it's ideal for reuse for meetings. The cabin was a place to live, and I think it would be ideally, it's a museum, reenactment, demonstrations. I think it'd be good, it could, like for a scout troop, Girl Scout troop, to come in for a presentation. But then that would be kept, the building would be kept as is, no power, no water, but you could have adjacent to it a shelter that say had power, and you could go out there and talk about it, and you wouldn't have to be inside putting chairs up and that. You go and look at it, and you go outside and under the canopy and do some sort of program.
Typically, fourth graders study Missouri history. And I know a lot of the log cabins are visited by many fourth grade classrooms at some time during that year. And as to what was life like back in the time. And then third grade is community. You study your community. And so they also take in local things in that area, where fourth graders will go out various places, maybe outside of their community for the study. So I could see that being an emphasis for a lot of the visits. And I think your suggestion of a shelter nearby where you can then gather and continue in depth with it. But you wouldn't want it to be available for meetings, because you would have to have chairs like this for a meeting to be held, but that's not conducive to a log cabin. You want
Right.
something more that's, now I know you have more formal things in your home that used to be a log cabin, but
Well, I don't live in the way they used to live
Right,
in it
right.
either.
Is it-
But,
are they furnishing it when they rebuild it, or is it meant to be historically accurate to that?
That's our conversation.
I would like that. I would like it to
We
be
get
like
help
that.
shape
Okay.
Yeah, do we know who provided the household items for the Foss Park little village? That might be worth exploring, you know, whether they bid out each of those items, you know, one kettle at a time, or if there's a group that they went through. I mean, there's always the joke in my family that you'll end up on a Cracker Barrel wall somewhere, but, you know, I agree with what you said. I'll say it before, I said it before and I'll say it again. I see it as the reenactment space very much like what Foss Park does, with tours and individuals in costumes, and they usually have something on a kettle over a fire, but then a weaving loom and things like that. And I'm sort of wondering where they got theirs from and how cost effective it would be for us to do the same thing. Now, whether you leave that in there or you take it out and only put it back in because of theft issues, I would almost,
That's why I was
I would
asking,
drag
just-
it out and only bring it back in when you need it.
Yeah, I think of it as Faust too, because we've gone out there a bunch, but
Mhm.
yeah, then you have the security issues. Why I was asking if you put stuff in it, you don't want that stuff disappearing. And then you start talking about power for security cameras.
Village, to me, Village Green becomes interesting from that perspective because we're obviously close here. You've got the ability, assuming there's some storage here, I guess storage is a premium as well, but, and then from the Celebrate Wild, if Village Green becomes what I hope it becomes, what I think people hope it becomes, I think that's a great little thing to have as part of Celebrate Wildwood. And hey, it's open, you can walk through and do a tour today, that type of thing.
Alan, what do you think?
I like that whole idea. I liked it when we talked about it at the last meeting, that it be located near City Hall and be located on the edge of the field where we have activities. It makes a lot more sense to me. And you could put your shelter there too, because it would get a lot of use. Not only because of the cabin, but because of the other things that go on in that space.
Great.
I have been for it being somewhere here in town center, near, either on City Hall property or on the Village Green property, now that we have that, ever since the beginning, for security reasons, just for the cabin alone. And it not having it in one of the parks where it's not going to have a presence around it as much. And the other thing is, with the community garden right by the building, you know, right behind City Hall now, and the Village Green and the City Hall property are contiguous, are they not?
Yes, ma'am.
So somewhere either on the current City Hall property or on the Green property near the community garden seems ideal to me in terms of imitating life. They would have had a garden, you know, by a log cabin probably of
Well,
some
you think
sort.
of Faust Village. They have gardens there in the summer.
Right.
And it's a lot of the old-time plants that are
Yeah.
in it. Now, that wouldn't be a city garden type of plants, maybe some of them would.
No.
But,
Rhubarb.
yeah.
Only if there's pie.
You know,
Yeah.
and I would assume that the people that participate in the community garden would love to have some sort of a shelter there under which they could have garden meetings. So it just all seems to fit together to me. And, you know, we see how things go and what, I don't know if you don't want to put electric in it or whatever, electricity in it or whatever, but just see what presents itself as to what it should be used for. I mean, I think we could eliminate things right now and say, no, we don't want it to be an event space, you know, or things like that, but it's, whether it just becomes a museum or it becomes something for, you know,
Yeah.
school groups to come
Yeah.
see or to hold early childhood programs
So,
in.
Yeah, I would
sounds like
think-
What I've heard is no meeting space, meeting area, that's out. Event space is out. More the museum or other activity. And more limited utility
Yeah,
type thing,
exactly.
if any.
Yeah, probably, I would say, you put electricity in it and you have a security system, an alarm
That-
system.
that probably
And that
makes
can be
sense.
put in there, you don't see
Inconspicuously,
it. I
yes.
mean,
Don't want a power line lead to the log cabin.
no, but,
No.
no, but the fact is that there's the motion detector up on the wall
Right.
that's hooked up to the police station that sees if somebody's in there. You know, that can be, we don't want an air conditioner sitting outside and a toilet in there, so.
Well, Kathy contacted,
Yeah, I contacted Carol Quigley, and she's the historic architect with Pattern Ives, who was on site and did the reassembly and assessment of the logs. And this was after we had contacted the family for feedback, and they had a little bit less recollection of it. But Carol said plumbing was not at all in there, and nor would she support from a historical perspective putting any plumbing in the cabin. But she said, and I wrote down exactly what she said because I thought it was great how she worded it. And there was electric in the main cabin. There were a number of outlets that they found in the assessment of the logs. So she said that a small amount of subtle electric in the main cabin is perfectly reasonable for rational contemporary circumstances. So.
Okay, point
I
out,
worded it that well.
rational contemporary circumstances.
well said.
How about irrational?
That's why I wrote it down. I would never come with that. Yeah,
No big screen TV, so.
that would be irrational, I think.
Right.
Theater seating.
When I talked to Chesterfield and within Faust Park, when all of it was developed, and they have a variety of cabins. They have some very primitive ones, and then they have the governor's house,
Yes.
and there's a great variety. And we might check with them about what concerns they had or what problems they ensued. And the same with isn't there a cabin in the park over, is it Manchester, Baldwin? They have a cabin over there, and I think that cabin is more like what we're doing, I think, here.
Yes.
We might check with them and see what their problems are with the cabin, or what they would do differently if they could.
What if that was a group training field trip?
Right.
Yeah.
That could be a group field trip for the training credit to hear from Faust and.
And then there's the
Mr. Chair.
Bacon Log Cabin that's
You try
in
the
Manchester
cabin.
as well.
Mr. Chair, what
Why
I'm
reinvent the
hearing
wheel?
is we remove Community Park and Glencoe City Park from our location matrix and focus on City Hall Village Green. And that we lean more toward a museum setting with maybe one utility, that being electric.
So just meant me your comment about the setting. Yeah, that was the only appealing part about the Glencoe Park as far as a historic community setting.
Yeah.
But if that's certain, if that gets it
You want to,
around here, that's fine.
I think you gotta trade traffic for who's gonna get the most use. Where is it gonna get the most use?
Well, most work. You don't want to,
Mhm.
we don't want to spend a lot of money on this and hide it in the middle of
Right,
you know,
exactly.
the community park. That seemed like a weird location to me because, but you know, they'd be definitely seen in those last two spots. So are you gonna rate that, the last one? You gonna put your ratings on top?
I am going, Kathy and I will revise the tables. And we'll eliminate 2 of the 4 locations, revise the ratings relative to a museum with electrical service that's rationally.
Rational in contemporary circumstances. Yeah.
I will say one thing to keep in mind is that when that prime place structure goes up, visibility will change.
When what goes up?
I said the visibility can change some when prime place goes up, so.
5-story building.
The one by the
theater. You've answered.
Okay, one other, I think in citing this, we should also look for enough space that I can see us someday being given a barn that we might want to re-erect on this site, be able to expand
Big site.
the thing as it goes, so.
Barn you're looking to get rid of?
Pardon?
So do you have the barn you're looking to get rid of?
No, but I just think you never know what you're gonna get next, but a smokehouse, something else that somebody's tearing down, and say, well, we'll take it and re-erect it. We got a place for it, if we have a place for it.
That's how it started in Chesterfield.
Yeah,
That's where all that came from,
right, yeah, so
all over the community.
let's keep it in mind for
Good
that.
direction.
I have great direction. Thank you.
I just need to secure that old 60s car for the old section of Route 66 that we're going to develop at some point, right? Can you help us with that? I can just picture that sitting on a piece of paper.
One of the parking spaces.
Okay, so that concludes all our agenda items, correct?
Yes.
Any other matters for consideration?
When we visited the property on Tillman Road today, I oftentimes have to play a role of where I tell you what the ordinance allows and doesn't allow. It's not that I'm trying to facilitate the demolition of our history, it's just we're bound by what the ordinance
Yeah.
identifies. So my apologies. I'm a sourdough oftentimes in a lot of good conversations. Saying that, I wanted to make sure before we left tonight that the motion that was approved did include the outbuildings along with the dwelling. And is
It
that,
did, didn't
was
it?
that everybody's?
And second did too.
Yes.
I think if we could find some way to give some sort of incentive to encourage people to save these old buildings, to restore them, and I have no idea what it can be. I mean, obviously money would be the biggest thing, and I don't see that happening. So there's really no incentive for them to save it. Just, it's easier to wait us out and tear it down.
We do have incentives, it depends on where the structure is. And the situation.
We had a property tax. We don't have a property tax, so
Yeah.
we can't abate it. But that's a big incentive that a lot of communities seem to
Right.
use. But we don't have that. We don't have a
Let's
grant.
not go for that either.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Gonna be mine.
We don't have a grant or a revolving loan program where we could give no interest loans and extend the period to repay those loans or just give outright grants. We just don't have that in this coming year. We wouldn't have the money to even consider it. We have zoning and subdivision incentives, which did play a role in several instances where we were successful. But right now, get it, it's like,
Yeah.
You know, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit too, because these people had the community's interest at heart. They took the time to actually explore who could repurpose this stuff. They did their civic duty. They bought 50 acres that could have been a subdivision that they want to preserve as pasture. So, I mean, they did a lot of really, really good things, and we were part of that. It's not a totally restored building, but it's not 20 houses either.
Yeah, no,
And
That's
the
right.
previous property owners want to let it
Right.
go where
no,
it
that
stopped.
site was, in itself, is historic.
Sure.
I'll also say that I think it is, you all do need to take some credit. We have 323 properties on our historic inventory. One was demolished this year, and that's the one we were at today. The only other demo site visit we did this year was Ann Stewart's, the Stewart property out on Pond Road, which the cabin was, he was only demoing the additions to restore the cabin. So we kind of gained one and lost one.
Yeah.
So at this rate, we'll all be long gone before we,
Do we
and
have-
we're adding each year. So I think that in 2018, we did have a fair number. I think we had 4. We had and it felt like like we were approaching a slippery slope of a lot of demolitions, but when I looked this week when I was writing the agenda, and I realized that really it's the only one we've done this year.
What about that log house on Wild Horse Creek, right at the, near the intersection, that they were talking about giving it to us or doing, what's happened with that?
Well, it's been demolished.
It's gone.
That was in 2018, so that was a last year one, and he was willing to donate it, but we basically said, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
So we may, I've been in contact with the property owner, and we may get some of the logs to use for fill-in the
Yeah.
Essen Log Cabin. But the property is, it's been
Okay.
torn down.
It was pretty noticeable.
Yeah, yeah.
Being clear.
That's a beautiful piece of property.
Mhm.
When,
But that brings up that whole demolition by neglect thing
Mhm.
that we talked about
Right.
last year, I think it was, that the city of St. Louis has that ordinance. And then that is a problem, because neglecting a property, essentially you're demolishing it by an ugly way. And that's kind of what happened to this one. It was going down. And there's a lot of buildings around that are, the same thing's happening. You can see they're just starting to fall down because they're not taken care of.
Well, the classic example in Wildwood is Pond Hotel. Previous historic preservation commissions had said, don't push too hard, because if you push too hard, the simple solution is, I'll demolish it. And there's really nothing we can do to stop. Obviously, not pushing hard, and we allowed it to basically be demolished by neglect. So, unless I'm told otherwise by this commission, I think the department's position is we're not going to let that happen again. We'll take that risk on the front end versus watching it deteriorate for years and years.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, if you leave somebody go, if you get them early, you may be able to do something. It's better to try it that way as opposed, because we saw what the other way was. Is to leave it go, didn't have a good outcome either. So it was actually worse to actually witness.
Yeah, you had to watch it.
Yeah.
And it was, and you know, the city department took a lot of criticism about that. And it's not that we don't get criticized all the time, but it was a hard one because, yeah, we thought we were doing the right thing for a long time. And then it became apparent when the roof in the back portion of the addition collapsed onto itself. Big time.
Do we have the ordinances on the books that are allows you to force them to?
Yes, we have a property maintenance code, which includes structures and buildings and elements on it, so.
That's a discussion that needs to be had at the next meeting.
We can give you a primer on what that all entails, if you'd like to hear about it.
I have one other question. As I recall, former member of this commission there was supposed to be a sign that he was supposed to make. What is the status of that?
Mr. Rosner, who is I don't know if it's a licensed blacksmith.
Right.
Was going to create the stand for one of our park signs, which is Cone Park, which is in the Monarch Historic.
Right.
His mother passed away.
Right.
And it's just hard to get a hold of him.
So it's just out there in limbo still? Did he ever sign a contract to do it?
He received the contract.
But never did anything about it? So how long are we gonna wait for?
Well, you are Kathy and I's bosses, so if you tell us to go to Plan B, we'll get started.
Well, I don't think it's gonna happen.
Well, you just want to make sure that one day it doesn't show up and, oh, here's my sign, pay me. So,
Well, let's sign the contract first,
We
right?
don't have a contract, so if he did it, it'd be a donation.
yeah, but,
So we'd be very
okay.
appreciative.
Yeah, okay. But you sent him a contract for him to sign and you never got it back? Okay. So there is no
essentially,
contract.
Yeah, my philosophy on there is if he hasn't signed the contract, it's been a year, hasn't it? Over a year?
Yeah.
I'd say he doesn't want to sign the contract, it's time to move on.
Yeah.
And his relationship with his mother, kind of his business partner, his administrative assistant, I mean, it was
It was very
difficult.
close.
Yeah, very difficult time for him, and I gave him all, there were more important things.
Yeah.
But he's no longer on the commission, we just don't see much of him anymore either, so. Like I say, if you want to think about it, we can talk about it in January, if you want to go a different direction. We can talk about what that might be, and then
Well, let's address that in January. We won't be rash about it, but I think we do need to move on at this point. It's time to get moving on. I don't want to seem harsh or anything, but let's just get going.
I guess the status of the park also needs to be considered in that conversation in terms of where that situation is and look at what we need to do. I mean, the people who donated the land deserve to have a sign there, so.
it was part of the donation.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, I think if we wait, it's okay, it's one thing to have patience, and there's another thing that's just, it's just, we owe them to
Can we
get this
use the
assignment.
people that's done our neighborhood signs? And just, boom.
I mean, the concept was really engaging. He was going to take rail, reform it into a base for a sign. And it was from the Katy Railroad. So it had a relationship and it just fit real well in that community of Monarch because it was a rail community, so to speak. So if you don't object, maybe I'll call Mr. Rosner and see what he says, see if he's.
Are you still interested?
Yep.
Are you still considering? If you do, let's get moving.
Because I think it could
Like
be
it.
really something special. Very talented in that regard, so.
Possibly give him a time limit to give you a decision, either signing a contract with an ending date in a contract.
Actually, there should be something in the contract on a schedule,
I'll have to
right?
find it, it's been so long ago.
Yeah.
There was an end date on it, but.
But you gotta sign it first.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's just a tough time for him.
Yeah,
Before we close, we do have
that's nice.
a couple of other things. Kathy was kind enough to put our schedule for 2020. I feel like most people, you'll plug those dates in sooner than later, so you don't get overbooked. And then the final report that we sent to the State Historic Preservation Office. Thanks to Kathy for putting it all together. Thank you for your updating your biographies. Mr. Adams, sorry, next year.
All right. Although, you got everybody's email, right? Should we send calendar invites instead of sending copies?
Yeah. Does everybody want that? Does anybody not want a calendar, an Outlook invite?
Outlook especially great.
You're, okay, I'm on it.
That's on my calendar.
There you go. Thank you both for all you do.
Yes.
Kathy and I'd like to wish you the best of the holiday season.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Prosperous New Year.
And our January meeting is the 23rd, which is
23rd.
Kathy's birthday, so maybe we'll have to eat again.
We'll bring
It's gotta be
cake.
cake.
We'll bring cake.
Cake and ice cream.
Sounds good. Okay, so here's the gallery.
I'd like to motion to adjourn. Should I be late for class?
Chris? Dan?
Second.
All approved?
I'm thinking
All right.
just.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
again. I know it's a
Thank you.
long day, so thank you.
We'll get
Well,
there.
there you go.
I might just go home and get this one out.
Well, I found out something new. Our new trash carrier, our trash collector, Veterans Day, they recognize as a holiday. Where Where the previous one,
Well, that's good, huh?
previous one didn't. They put my trash out, my recycles out for, on Wednesday, and they didn't pick it up. What's wrong?
Show me your
Took the
keys.
trash down the next day.
I know,
They
right?
had to recycle that.
It's a miracle.
Out on site?
Yeah, that's why I was
They
running late. I just
recognized
couldn't
that as a
find
holiday.
it.
See ya.
Ours
I
days
have
are
like
Monday and
2 work
Tuesdays.
bags and
Yeah.
all these different
Thursday,
purses.
Wednesday.
Maybe there
It
needs
was
to
in
be
my,
something.
it was in a different coat.
Newsletter or something.
I had my dad.
Well,
You know,
they said
about
that
that.
they would